get started again? I'm kind of reaching up for the mic because it's set for Carter. And as you can see, there's a little bit of height difference between him and I. So I'm Cliff Strain, the Executive Director of PAPHA, and we also have several board members here present. If board members can raise their hands so people know who you are. So if you want to learn more about PAPHA, you're welcome to wrangle one of those guys anytime, or me, and find out about what we're doing. We have a lot of stuff going on and a lot of new stuff for the chapel, and I'm not going to steal any of Carter's fire, but the chapel is really looking tremendous, and PAPHA has always had a great relationship with the Carters, and we feel very blessed and grateful and excited about all the things that we've done and are going to do together, and we're it's wonderful that we have this 1937 chapel that was built by a woman that was really quite a Renaissance woman of her times, that is available to the public to view on a regular basis, and it's because of the Carter's generosity that we're able to do that. So Carter Brown is the great-grandson of Aline Carter, and he also practices law in San Antonio. He's very actively involved in the website, chapelondunes.org, with Marlene, his mom, who also, they do put together just an incredible website. If you've never been on it, there's a ton of information and pictures and images and stories, and it's just definitely worth your time to spend some time looking through it. So I think at this point I'm going to turn it over to Carter.
Thanks, Cliff, and thank you again for inviting me to be here. I am Carter Brown, the great-grandson of Aline Carter. My mother, Marlene Carter Lawson, is here as well. She actually remembers Aline Carter. I actually never met Aline, but through family stories, I had interest in making a website and restoring the history of the chapel. And of course, the museum has been wonderful in helping make that accessible to everyone. So the lecture today, I'm going to talk about the chapel in the dunes and its creation. Aline B. Carter, the poet laureate, the woman who built the chapel, her family, her life and education, and the artisans she commissioned to create the chapel. So Aline B. Carter was born Aline Badger, or Charlotte Aline Badger, in San Antonio, Texas in 1892. She actually was born in this home right here, a Campman-built house that still stands today on South Alamo Street. And she lived in it with her mother and father, grandmother, and aunt. There she is with her grandmother on the porch. How's that? Better? Yes. Okay. And you can still visit the home. It's near La Vita in San Antonio. And a wonderful book also is available about the architect. Let's see. So Aline's mother is Blanche Eager Badger. She actually was very much a part of Aline's life in helping raise the three rambunctious boys, and she lived with the Carter family and traveled with them to various trips to Port Aransas and during the summer and elsewhere. Here she is in Port Aransas, and that's Frank Carter, her grandson, Aline's son, and a friend. I'm going to speed through some of these, but you can just enjoy the photographs here. So this is Aline's father, Frank Joseph Badger, and he was involved in the mercantile trade and banking, and he was also in the Belknap Rifle Company and the Philippine insurrection after the Spanish-American War. He truly instilled all of the passions that we know Aline for today, including the love of nature, science, language, art, poetry. He, for example, made Aline memorize the native trees of Texas blindfolded by touch of bark and leaf. And it's through her father that she really took off with these passions of nature. Okay, having some reception problems with the mouse here. So this is the home Aline moved into once she married H.C. Carter. This home was actually built in 1893 by William Harvey Maverick, and he's the son of Samuel Augustus Maverick, the original Maverick that we all know today as being the Maverick that's unbranded, the signer of the Texas Declaration of Independence. So William Harvey Maverick, the son, moved in with a large family. There he is with Mary Adams Maverick, the famous woman pioneer of San Antonio, who wrote the memoirs of Mary Maverick. It's an Alfred Giles built home, and it still stands today as a home museum, which we have restored. And you can visit the home downtown and see our website and to make arrangements. It's a Richardsonian Romanesque home with 23 rooms and features all the original architecture of Alfred Giles, pretty much unchanged except in a few key parts. There it is, the original location before they altered the course of the river. Over here. And then they built the Municipal Auditorium, the Atlee B. Ayers Marvel Spanish Mission style auditorium. So here's the home in 1893, and the home a bit later with the modification of the observatory on top and the solarium, both additions that Aline added. The changes reflected her interest and passions. That would be the solarium, one of her favorite rooms, allowing for a great breeze during the hot summer days of San Antonio. And then the observatory, which was built in 1925. That was built by her friend Ethel Wilson Harris, an artisan I'll talk more about later. But she put that on the rooftop and installed a telescope there. Aline also asked her friend Ethel to build a chapel in her home. They converted the library into a beautiful little chapel for her family and friends. And in there you have an altar and several chairs. Stained glass also added as well. And this is around 1925. Here's some modern pictures right here. After the restoration, and the chairs were done by Ethel Harris and her husband Arthur Harris. Arthur died shortly thereafter. Aline was a very religious, devout Episcopalian. She was a member of the St. Mark's Episcopal Church just around the corner. That is a beautiful church still standing on the Travis Park Square. You can go and visit it just a walk away. And as was described to me, Aline was always very interested in the connection between religion and science. They were never in conflict with her as far as her views being, and she was always, as it was told to me, she would say, science is a process of understanding the works of God, and she loved geology, biology, and she had a large collection of fossils and biology specimens that she would teach students and her own children with, and also, of course, the astronomy. She always said that she would pray. It was always said that she would pray every day that her 3 boys would go into the priesthood, but things changed in such a nature that she prayed every day that they would just stay out of the penitentiary. It worked out, I suppose. So we have, this is her husband, Henry Champ Carter, and he was 30 years her senior, born in 1860. That's actually not that unusual for the time, but it's still quite an age gap, and he was the 24th president of the Texas State Bar, and he was known frequently as Judge Carter. Even though he never held the office of judge. So he did have a first wife and 4 children with his first wife. These half-siblings I'll note in the future, but after the death of his first wife, he remarried Aline 2 years later, and that is when she moved into the Maverick Carter house, as it is known today. So here's Aline with her 3 boys, and you can see in the middle picture there. The youngest being my grandfather. He's in little curls that he could not stand, but she made him wear. And then you have Frank Carter in the middle, and then you have Champ Jr. And Frank is moved down to Port Aransas for most of his adult life and became a local here, and is known as the keeper of the chapel. And David later purchased the chapel. I'll get into that more later, but they would come often to Port Aransas for quite lengthy stays in the summer. Frank joined the Navy and served on the USS New Jersey, and David in the Army in Europe. There's Frank to the left and David to the right. So Frank eventually moved down to Port Aransas in 1961. He actually purchased the home from his mother and actually set up a few home rentals. And only later in 1988 did he sell the chapel to his brother, who was very interested in restoration, having done many projects in San Antonio. But Frank still kept an eye on the chapel and was known as the caretaker or the keeper of the chapel, even up till his death at age 99. Here's David Carter. He's my grandfather. He actually purchased the family home and then eventually, as I mentioned earlier, the chapel. He has a love for restoring old buildings, and he was an attorney, but it's through David that a lot of historical restoration became meaningful, and one of the reasons why we continue to this day to try to monitor and restore these old buildings. So his last restoration of the chapel was in 1999, and that was a few years before the museum, but that sort of started the whole ball rolling with getting a relationship down here for public access to the chapel. But the chapel has always been open to people and passerbyers. So a little bit more about Aline and her early education and childhood. Aline was born in 1892. She married in 1916 and died in 1972. She had one sister that died very young, and that she never spoke of again at the age of 13. Having some mouse communication problems here. Maybe. Oh, there we go. Okay. Just some fun photos of Aline in San Antonio. This is the Battle Flowers Parade. San Antonio has every fiesta every April, and that's actually a wonderful event that continues to this day. If you ever go to San Antonio, I recommend seeing this beautiful city tradition. These are horse-drawn carriages and floats, parade floats. So Aline was a poet laureate between 1947 and 1949. She was an astronomy educator at the Whitty Museum and her own home. She was an artist and a harpist, a musician of sorts. She received her education at Wellesley College, and it is there that's where she really picked up on astronomy. Wellesley College at the time had one of the finest observatories of any college, and one of the finest professors of astronomy. She actually attended the year before the great college hall burned down. But unfortunately, her father died unexpectedly, and she had to return home to help with the family, help with household finances, and she couldn't continue her education. But while she was, she did actually receive additional education at the Eric Pape School of Art in Boston, and also the Boston Conservatory with harpist Harriet A. Shaw. And so she was actually quite talented with the harp and proficient in piano. She wrote 2 books, Halo of Love, which she illustrated, and Doubt Not the Dream. Here's some also illustrated broadside poems, and one unpublished novel, Light Upon the Hills. So she was appointed a poet laureate in 1947, and one of her lasting legacies was to create the Texas Poetry Day, which is on October 15th. And that is still recognized today, although now we go even further with Texas Poetry Month, or National Poetry Month. And that was signed in proclamation by Governor Jester, one of his few final acts before his death. Aline created a poetry competition, which she funded and had student participation. We resurrected this, one in San Antonio and one here in Port Aransas with the museum, and it's been quite fun and successful. Here's some of the collections of Aline, the geology, biology collections, astronomy. Always enjoyed looking at this octopus in a jar she kept, and all these little interesting specimens. So she did teach at the Whitty Museum in San Antonio and taught several students. Some of you may know Whitley Strieber, one of her students, and then another one, Paul Maley, went on to NASA, said he was very inspired by Aline, and it was through Paul Maley that we actually had the observatory recognized as a historical site. So Aline would teach using this projector or this magic lantern. Some of you may know what that is. It's a 500-watt GE bulb powered projector that would have these glass slides, and she would hang down a projector screen in the middle of her parlor home. Oh. So there's some students in the observatory. This gentleman went on to NASA, and we actually got in touch with him later on, and he's the one that designated the observatory as a historic site. Here it is, the observatory today. We had it fully restored. There you can see the municipal auditorium, now the Tobin Center in the background. You can't really see much now in San Antonio in the night sky, just about the planets and the moon, but still the view of Mars is wonderful, in Jupiter. And here we have some red light that we actually added. That's not original, but and that is the Tobin parking garage, which is an unfortunate addition, but it makes for a very neat picture. And this was a beautiful, I guess that was a supermoon event there that we opened it up for. The observatory still works, but this latch sometimes gets a bit shaky. There was almost a guillotine on my head, but we were able to close it, so fortunately that worked out. Here's the telescope. It's a 1918 4-inch Bosch and Lohm refractor telescope. Bosch and Lohm, of course, doesn't make telescopes anymore, but it's on a German equatorial mount right here, and you'll see that actually, if you can spot some plumbing parts, that's because the equatorial mount was designed by a lawyer, and he was just passing by and thought it might be fun to help out. It was restored by UTSA, Brian Tobias. And also Houston, what was it, Sky and Sea and Land. So here's some of there's the square piano Aline grew up practicing on, and there she is with her Wurlitzer Stark harp that her beloved harp her father gave her before he died. Aline was also known for having a yearly Christmas party for the San Antonio orphans, in which the St. Mark's Church would come down the stairs singing Christmas carols and exchange gifts, and while she played the harp, and all the orphans would receive wonderful presents. Just an experience that my grandfather and great uncle would always talk about, how important that giving was to Aline, that in fact they never received birthday gifts themselves. They would always give them away. It's better to give than to receive. And here the Christmas gifts to the orphans, and there they are beneath the stairs with Aline and her harp. So we just restored the home in 2018, and it is now a museum, and in there you can see the life of Aline and her family, and learn more about her history, and as well as basically San Antonio history. A lot of early San Antonio artists and artisans are part of the small town of San Antonio at that time. This is the front sitting room, formal sitting room, and we have here the dining room, and again her chapel, which used to be the William Maverick's oak-lined, wood-shelved library. This is one of my favorite views. It's the horseshoe arch with the newel post with the acanthus leaves, teardrop, and acanthus scroll, and beautiful acanthus rosettes and column here. Some fun things we found. We reactivated the speaking tube, an old communication technology that they had back then, where you just basically blow a whistle through the basement tube, and it whistles out the top floor. But on the other end, I think David said he never actually used, the family never used it, but he would sometimes terrorize guests with the high shrill. This is the second floor landing. And here's the nursery. Actually, this is where the three boys stayed. They had three small beds here. This bed right here is actually their great-grandmother's. When she died, they moved her things into that room. But the three boys stayed here, and they were quite abusive to that room, and their mark can be felt throughout the house. You'll see a lot of cracked tile on this fireplace. And actually, they would jump from the balcony to the tree over there. They actually credit killing that poor Spanish oak from too many jumps. But they had quite an interesting childhood. They had an alligator in the backyard pond that escaped into the municipal auditorium during a dance. And that made the newspaper. And then have a javelina and raccoon and all sorts of things running around the house. So here's the ballroom or game room or a billiard room. It depends on what person you ask, but apparently, according to the Mavericks, it was used for none of those purposes. And here's again the observatory. And an evening shot. So we, just like the chapel in the dunes here, we have a museum going. It's been temporarily closed at the moment, but we're slowly reopening. And we have functions with Youth Orchestra of San Antonio, YOSA, and we also have our own poetry event there and with young students, and poetry contest, and astronomy clubs. So it's been very exciting. And again, we're restarting guided tours shortly. Aline, of course, being a very spiritual person, left a religious mark wherever she went. She had a beloved location by Slumber Falls, where she erected a cross that actually still stands there today. And again, just like Port Aransas, she erected a religious monument for her to observe, as well as this rock pew that overlooks the cliff. So a bit about Aline coming down to Port Aransas. That was actually started in 1914 is when the first family members started to come down to Port Aransas, like many early Texans of that time. It became quite a magnet vacation recreation spot for duck hunting and fishing, and even apparently shooting on the jetty. So Aline would initially come down and they would rent a house in the 20s, and they would stay for about a month or two, and her husband would come down on the weekends. I was told by one of the elder cousins it would take sometimes it was about 8-hour drive back then in the teens. mouse delay. Okay. There's Randolph. He actually was the one that brought the family down to Port Aransas and encouraged them to explore the place. He got the first family home there with and it's still standing, and as well as his brother. This is the half-brother, by the way, from the first marriage, Randolph, and his brother Goodwin also had an interesting house that was a former World War II barracks, which is still standing on 12th Street. And you can see it there to the lower left. And that picture there is from the old barracks and Coast Guard camp. And this is the home across from the chapel, across the street that the family used to come down. It's still standing as that blue house up there. And they would rent that before finally purchasing a home that was built by the Fair family. Ralph Fair, you may know of Fair Oaks Ranch, which is a large suburb of San Antonio. This house is actually two structures that were put together from the flats across from the Tarpon Inn. They pulled them across the sand and erected them on this sand dune and fitted them together. And here it is. We just completed restoration just a few months ago. And there's the chapel, also recently restored. And inside the home, we have the original door and the last remaining iron cross. The Fairs had a little chauffeur cabin that was unfortunately demolished. But you can see some of Old Town in the background, and the cistern of Old Port A when the Fairs owned it. And you can actually see the Ralph Fair and his wife Dorothy in their tarpon scales at the Tarpon Inn. So they sold the home in 1934 and to the Carter family, and they this additional house was placed on the lot in 1949. So if you look at the chapel, you'll see these two structures. This is a 1949 rental house that has been extensively remodeled, so it doesn't bear any resemblance. But on to religious structures on the island. You'll note that the chapel on the dunes is not the oldest church on the island or chapel. It's actually, depending on how you count, either the second or third, but it is, I guess, currently the oldest continuously operated chapel, at least having continuous religious functions and services on occasion, and including baptisms and weddings. But the St. Joseph's Catholic Church is, I believe, possibly the oldest surviving religious structure on the island. There may be another home that had religious use at the time, but this Catholic church you can still see just down Oak Street, and it's now a full-time residence. It's quite wonderfully restored, and it's quite a beautiful structure to look at. And it was built in 1919, or before 1919, but you'll note that they actually had a large congregation and moved out shortly thereafter, especially after the hurricane. And then, of course, the other old church is the Presbyterian Church, the Community Presbyterian Church that you can still see on Allister Street, 1941. And you can find that information in that wonderful book available here at the museum gift shop by Mark Crichton and Guthrie Ford. And it's a wonderful book of Port Aransas history. So Aline called the chapel of Eternal Light. So only recently did we call it the Chapel on the Dunes. But she loved the way the light rays shined throughout the day, through all the windows of the chapel. She had it built in 1937-38, and she commissioned her friend Ethel Wilson Harris to do so. This is the first picture upon completion of the white interior walls. And you'll see that there's a brick foundation. It's actually a concrete stucco over a wood stud frame, and it's hollow and still, though, very sturdy, and it has survived every hurricane, losing a few windows here and there, but for the most part, keeping intact. Here is the 1999 restoration. You can see, again, just concrete stucco. And one of our favorite pictures, Aline wrote, "My little chapel, the music of the waves and the wind is the organ." And here you can see, again, the cross and the stained glass above the window, which we duplicated in the restoration process. Here, a church group coming to visit in the 50s. And here's an interior shot, which we based this picture right here on. We used this to recreate the original ironwork, which you can now see in place today. And again, you can make out the stained glass, which I picked through the sand to find samples to match, and we were lucky enough to get I think it's called the Kokomo 11 stained glass, which has been reinforced for hurricanes. And then we have the altar and tile, which Aline drew, and she sketched this altar as well. "I'm the light of the world," and these types of flower tile, which she had her friend Ethel Wilson Harris create in her workshops. So this is the chapel before restoration. We have mahogany windows here, dark wood, and a lot of paint falling off, and windows not actually according to the historic look. And there's the interior. And there's the plywood door with a mahogany front. And we had the door, we had the windows remade to the historic proportion and look by a mill worker and artisan, Luis Elizondo. He is quite skilled, and he recreated these doors for the LaSalle County Courthouse, other windows as well, and the Edwards County Courthouse, the Fulton Mansion, which I highly recommend. It's in Rockport, Fulton. He did over 70 windows of restoration and replacement. And so he's quite skilled in historic restoration of windows. Here's some of the samples of stained glass I found and that were used on the top right there. There's the original picture. There's the recreation by Lewis. And here's another pictures of Lewis's work. The door of the chapel was actually created by Stan Gluza, and he actually is a wonderful craftsman that made restoration work on the Panna Maria Cathedral church doors. I was fortunate enough to find the original chapel door inside the Frank's garage, and it was painted white, which I removed the white paint, and we used the basic design to recreate and duplicate, and made a few alterations for strength for hurricanes, and Stan did a wonderful job there. And we tried to match the original picture with a new door handle and latch. So a bit about the woman who actually built the chapel. Ethel Wilson Harris is a noted artisan and entrepreneur of San Antonio. She was born in 1893, died in 1894, and she is really known famously as a businesswoman that created what is collectively known as the Mission San Jose tile or San Jose tile arts and crafts. But specifically the names are Mexican Arts and Crafts, San Jose Potteries, Mission Crafts. These were three different, sometimes she ran one downtown. These would take care of different functions, and they created tile and benches and several murals. It's quite a large portfolio of work. She actually did not do the tiles herself. She did a few tiles herself, but the tiles that they are known for, the characteristic look is attributed to Fernando Ramos, a talented artist and artisan, and he did many of the beautiful plates that you may see still in auction houses today and still going around. And she was also the head of the Works Project Administration, the WPA of San Antonio for Arts and Crafts. And you'll see a lot of all the WPA murals throughout San Antonio were done by Ethel Wilson Harris. And she was the only Texas business represented at the Chicago World's Fair from San Antonio. And there's a beautiful picture of the fountain that she made. It's actually available in that book by Susan Toomey Frost, Colors on Clay. And so she was so well loved. She was the only, I believe, the only business asked back for the New York World's Fair to make an even larger fountain. So there she is in the Nat Lewis barn. That was in the backyard across the river from the Maverick Carter house. And that is how Aline became such good friends with Ethel. And they were close, being artists and also just close neighbors. So San Jose Potteries was downtown, located by Mission San Jose. They would create such tile works as these, and you can actually still see these appear available for sale as collector's items. Her home by Mission San Jose, and you can see a lot more in this wonderful book here. Just a letter to Aline from Ethel. According to Frank Carter, she pretty much single-handedly made the chapel. She would carry a 50-pound sack of cement over her shoulder, went up the dunes like a mule, he said, and she just poured. She made several trips with her own family, and interestingly enough, one of their descendants told me that she had a lot of trouble with the cement, pouring it would not mix with the sand here very well, so she actually had to transport sand to Port Aransas to mix, and they of course didn't have a reliable ferry. Then they used shrimp boats to bring supplies across on certain times of the day, and I guess I believe some of the family, Frank and David, brought some flagstone from the hill country. So it was just a collective effort of bringing supplies across from fishing boats, the ferry, and other passerbyers across the channel. So the barn is no longer there, but you'll see one of her murals, or one of many murals on the Riverwalk. If you ever walk downtown in San Antonio, you'll see these wonderful tiles, and most likely they came from Ethel Wilson Harris's businesses. these are just more of her works. She did have her own ironwork in Mission San Jose, but she also had a partnership with Theo Voss of Voss Metalworks to create a lot of these beautiful metal iron tables. So some of this may be familiar if you've seen these San Jose tiles. Plates and other items as well, cups. This is her signature agave logo. Although there's quite a lot of number of counterfeit or duplications made by California companies to this day. This is another chapel that's based on a private ranch right now. It's St. Denis Mission Catholic Church. Ethel Harris did not build the church, but she added these tiles along the side right here and some of the ironwork. This is a 1952 church, done in the mission style. So we were missing some of the tiles, and to replace them, we asked Sienna Dunas Jin to recreate them, and she's done numerous work, including on the San Pedro Creek and San Antonio Riverwalk that are done in the WPA style of the Mission San Jose tiles. And we were very fortunate to be able to have her help us with this. We were missing this one tile and 2 terracotta tiles, which she duplicated. And we made some recreations here and color samples, and she did a wonderful job. And actually, we're working on another project with the museum here to hopefully make little tile markers for historic sites across Port Aransas. So a bit about the other artisan, Theo Voss. He is a German immigrant. He was actually born in the U.S., German parents, and then they actually migrated back to Germany and Wittenberg, and he, through the guild system, learned ironwork, and when he moved back to San Antonio, he created a business. It went under in the Great Depression, but he started again and created Voss Metalworks. And it's through there that he had a partnership with Ethel Wilson Harris, and also did his own work as well. So that's the last remaining ironwork that we found, and we based all the proportions on. And also some ironwork that you can see in the Maverick Carter house that he did. The 3 most famous items by Theo Voss. This is a 2-story tall chandelier in the Aztec Theater of San Antonio. At least at the time, it was said to be the largest chandelier in Texas. 14 feet wide, 75 lamps, 275 lights, and it was placed into the theater the day the stock market crashed, and it was made in just 35 days. It's quite a marvelous, beautiful chandelier. Well worth a visit. And another item, being of such note as an artisan, he quickly gained fame and was asked to contribute to the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. This is the gate that he built, and there's some fun stories, one of them being that these grapes are actually screw heads, that are bolts that were airplane parts during the war. They were trying to be very careful and efficient with the metal use then. And perhaps one of his most beautiful designs, and he has quite a wonderful relationship with Texas A&M University. You'll see at the Scots Hall a beautiful ironwork entry. This is the creation of that door with the inside his original factory. It was actually so large they actually had to mount it at an angle. And there he is with his son Kurt. And here is a picture today. You can see the detail of his ironwork. There's to hide the screw, he put it right in the middle of the flower there, and put the petals around it there. It's quite an impressive design if you look at it. At A&M, he did some chandeliers too, and several other buildings around campus. And we were fortunate enough to get his grandson, Ted Voss, and his great-grandson, Garrett, to recreate the items that they created, I guess, 1937, many decades ago. And we have here some of their drawings that they made to scale and using the original cross. And they hot dipped that just like with the items at the King Ranch to make sure that they don't rust away too soon. And just in case they do, we did 3D scan them for 3D printing. But we had them mounted up here again, and this is actually, we were fortunate enough to find a original Theo Voss latch and door handle. And safekeeping there for a hurricane on the computer. And so I know that John Cobb spoke a couple weeks ago, so I didn't want to go too much into this, but in 1978, John Cobb, another artist of note and great talent, he contributed to the chapel by painting the whitewashed walls with his I guess Old and New Testament paintings, the Old Testament on the north wall, the New Testament on the south wall, and he did that I believe in 1978. And as part of that journey of his, he says he made a second chapel, which was done in a different style. The style that he, in his own words, uses for the chapel is that somewhat childlike, and this one is closer to a Renaissance portrait. And actually, just recently, after he gave his talk, he did some touch-ups and repairs to the chapel. It's always very abusive here on the coast. And we still have a few more touch-ups to do. We're still working on repairing the stained glass as well as the one stained glass that John Cobb created. And we're going to make sure that those are mounted correctly and able to remove those in a hurry if a hurricane comes. But here's the chapel as it stands now, finished and restored, and added a new railing here and fresh ironwork and windows. And again, with the museum here, we have been having a great relationship with them, and we're now doing, I believe it's our third year of poetry competitions with students. We were lucky enough to have the Texas Poet Laureates, Alan and Carla, be judges, and Glenn Vondra, a local poet, and it's been really fun to see the kids inspired. We have fun, Cliff being very much part of making sure that the environment is similar to that of what Aline provided with cookies and cake and ice cream. Aline was always known as bringing those each Sunday lesson when she would come down to her chapel and read Bible stories to the island children. It would always be nice to have some cookies and cake to incentivize that, I suppose. So the museum runs tours every first and third Saturday of the month. And we have a website that has a full history of the chapel and more pictures, more information if you're interested. And basically, we're very happy to have the museum continue to open this to the public. That's what it's here for. Aline always wanted this to be accessible to everyone. And it's with that, her spirit, that we continue to operate it today. And that is why we continue to try to share her message. So thank you.
Do we have any questions for Carter before we go? Carter, one question I get a lot is that steel rod that goes across the front of the altar. When was that put in? Was that a stabilizing rod?
Right, that's the rod across the altar is a support beam, and it's been there since it was built. Actually, I believe that one sketch you could actually see that there was an additional support rod hanging from the ceiling. That they must have either changed that or moved it, but it's always been there as far as we know.
Any more questions?
I'm Frank Morgan. I'm on the board of PAPHA, and there are two things I want to say. One is I met his great uncle Frank at a restaurant here in town one day about, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago. I walked in and his great uncle Frank Carter was right behind me, and this woman said, "Hey Frank, how you doing?" And I looked at her and I thought, how the heck do you know who I am? And she said, "You want your usual?" And I looked at her again and I thought, what the heck? And he went over and sat down, and I looked at him and I walked over and I said, "Is your name Frank?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, my name's Frank." And he lived right around the corner from me and up by the chapel. And so I got to know him. And he was a wonderful guy. And he died at 98, 99.
99.
And we'd visit with him. People who lived across the road from him were friends of ours, and we'd visit with him periodically. But we had breakfast together a lot at the Island Cafe. And a woman told me one day, she said, "He's been coming in here for 37 years having the same breakfast." And so I went over, and one day I said, "Frank, what are you eating for breakfast? Because I want to eat the same damn thing." But anyway, so it just, I felt like I had a connection to the Carter family because of that. The other thing I want to say is, I just said I'm a member of the board. Our museum and gift shop is open. We'd love for you to stop by and look at what we've got, look at the museum, and if you want to buy something, we're more than happy to sell it to you.
Thank you all again. We're giving all the Valentines the week off, but we will resume on the 21st. We've had two different people scheduled that have, for different reasons, reneged on their deal, but we will have something on the 21st, and the 28th will be the artist. Okay, oh, I'm glad you said, after this tonight, they're going to be at the Civic Center because of early voting is going to, we won't be able to use this building. So we'll have the little mixer with refreshments at the Civic Center. We won't be able to use the museum, but we might open up the museum on that day to allow that.